today's workshop, boilerplate stuff. U.S. foreign policy direction changed under U.S. President George W. Bush in the year 2000. U.S. invaded Iraq under bogus, false, or concocted reasons. The U.S. used armed private security contractors in Iraq quite a bit because there weren't enough troops to cover the country. The use of these contractors caused death, mayhem, and hatred of many innocent Iraqis. It's a very sore subject in my house, since my wife is an Iraqi. Okay, Iraqi soldiers manning a vehicle security checkpoint on the road to Baghdad International Airport. Actually, the soldiers now are not actually soldiers. Most of the checkpoints are either Shiite or Sunni militiamen, death squad members dressed up as army soldiers. So you never know who you're going to run into. There are a number of outsider contributing factors why they used these what are called PMSCs, private military security companies in Iraq. There were stability and instability factors, potential levers of power by using them. We'll go over a quick view of mercenary history and then the rise of these private companies, especially since the 1990s. So picture of Iraq in the year 2000. Baghdad is here in the middle, and Basra is here. I worked in both places. I was in Iraq about 3 years. This is the Al-Rahman Mosque, which as far as I know is still under construction in Baghdad. If complete, it'll be the second largest. It'll be the second largest mosque in Iraq. It was started by Saddam Hussein, but the war stopped all the construction. The last time I talked to my wife about it, she said nothing has been done. There's no money. This is the airstrike, or the massive airstrike on the presidential palace compound in Baghdad, Iraq, on March 21st, 2003. Quick story. There was a telephone microwave relay tower where my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, on the same night where they lived in the suburb of Basra. So they figured the U.S. Air Force was going to bomb it. So they decided to get out of the house and scatter. Of course, the Americans and British invaded the next morning. They had to wait a few weeks before they went back to see what was left of the house and the neighborhood. They found the neighborhood had been obliterated. They did bomb the whole area. There was only one house left standing. That was her house. But because there were so many militiamen, death squads hunting down bad party members, she couldn't go home again. I used four international relations theories. These are different type of theories or supporting. This is actually a thesis that I did under Darrell. Mercenaries have existed throughout history. The Greeks, Romans, and Swiss have all had or used mercenaries. Italian mercenaries, Japanese samurai, and French Foreign Legion. French Foreign Legion still exists. They're not actually technically mercenaries, they're actually part of the French army, but they acted like mercenaries since they're not, they're all foreigners. The modern version of mercenaries began early in the 1960s in Asia and Africa, and now mercenaries, essentially there are none. They've all been supplanted by private military security firms. These are a couple of the different laws that are supposed to cover these private companies. Of course, none of them really did. Well, the laws were there, but they were never enforced. UN and international law has rules on mercenaries. Again, none of those were used in Iraq. Effective Allied bombings right at the start of the war. That pretty much sums up what Baghdad looked like and the rest of some of the other big cities. Army Iraqi commandos teaching young soldiers combat training in Bukaba, 2007. The United Nations had a working group on mercenaries that had some recommendations, but again, nothing was carried out since the United States and the UK and South Africa have the vast majority of mercenary companies. They also made more recommendations, get licensing, vet people, set up a criminal justice system, and respond to communications. None of those things were done. Some of the private security companies hired people with mental problems or were criminals. That was found out later. There was an initiative in 2008. This was pushed by the International Committee of the Red Cross to start setting up controls because things were so notoriously bad in Iraq. It was the first step to try to rein in these private contractor companies. The deputy director of Iraq's National Museum is in tears because as soon as the war started, people started looting everything. They completely stripped out all the government offices, the museums, anything that had to do with the Iraqi government was stripped away. Talk a little bit about law and the orders. Supposedly, the U.S. invasion of Iraq was launched to counter terrorism, but Iraq didn't have terrorism and didn't support it. Saddam Hussein was very fearful of terrorism because they thought they would attack him. Then the total opposite happened. The U.S. invasion of Iraq fueled terrorism. It didn't stop it. It started it, or at least started it, inflamed it. And then after the attack on the Twin Towers in New York in 9/11, that led to these private military security companies being set up. And then these companies took total economic advantage of Gulf War II. Soldiers crossing the Kuwait-Iraq border right at the start on March of 2003. There's an oil well that's been set afire. Marines in northern Kuwait are gearing up to go invade Iraq the next day. Ethical considerations. The U.S. claimed they did the invasion of Iraq for humanitarian reasons. Well, that didn't work. But these reasons were all false. The moral principle of just war was also either altered or ignored. But one American author argued that the U.S. should have stayed the course in Iraq. They should have stayed there, fixed the country, solved the problems. But obviously they didn't. Quick history of Iraq. It's been one of the world's great and oldest civilizations. Babylonians, Sumerians, Hittites, Assyrians all ruled. Greeks, the Persians, Parthians, and Romans also came and ruled. And then Iraq, what's now Iraq, was invaded by Islamic invaders, conquered Iraq in the 7th century. Baghdad was considered the center of the world until the Mongol invasion in the 13th century. The Ottoman Empire ruled Iraq as provinces from the 16th century to 1918. Modern Iraq was actually created in 1920 by Winston Churchill. Then there was independence in 1932, the rise of the Ba'ath Party, and then Saddam Hussein. And then there were several wars, the Iran-Iraq War, Gulf War I, Gulf War II. Guns for hire. The reduced state control of the exclusive use of force and increased proclivity to confront international risks, maximizing international efficiency, and reducing costs of benefits by using outside security contractors. Security contractors, though they're expensive, are actually much cheaper than using Army troops, because you can fire a contractor in 1 minute and get rid of a contract. You can hire fast, you can get rid of them fast, you can use them if there are risks instead of sending troops over there, but you lose state control, and that was what happened in Iraq. There was no state control. The security contractors ran around shooting up Iraqis just for fun. Pretty much countries like the US and UK are outsourcing armed security in war zones, and the whole idea to set up these companies, they were cheaper than using military troops. And the trend is to increase the use of security contractors, because most security contractors are ex-police, ex-military. They've already been trained. They don't need extra training. They don't have leave. They're just paid a daily rate. Iraqis looked at rows of graves in an overflowing cemetery built in a soccer arena in Fallujah in May of 2003, or May 2004. The cost of using private security contractors over the cost of using military soldiers, they don't have to pay any contractor benefits. You just get a salary. You're dead, too bad. You don't get retirement. The U.S. saves on the retirement and medical costs. The contractor pays the medical costs. The U.S. government can get rid of contractors immediately, and then they can hire more contractors quickly if they need. Probably the most notorious contractor was Blackwater. There were numerous incidents of killing and wounding Iraqi civilians just for fun, like sport. Blame also fell on the U.S. military, who also did it, but not as bad as Blackwater, because the Iraqis couldn't tell who was who. But the U.S. never took any action, except for Nisour Square. Nisour Square in Baghdad, Blackwater guards indiscriminately killed 17 innocent Iraqi civilians, but nothing ever happened. Blackwater really constructed a culture of lawlessness. Though 4 Blackwater guards were killed in Fallujah, then Blackwater felt justified killing Iraqis sometimes at random or fun, or if they thought somebody was in the way, if they thought they were threatened, the car came too close, they shoot first and ask questions later. And there was never any action taken against them. The effect of these companies on Iraq and security and sovereignty, because there was wanton killings that contributed to the insurgency greatly. The insurgents said, hey, who needs to put up with this stuff? It set the stage for lawlessness that's engulfing Iraq now. It caused destabilization of Iraq's own security, and it damaged Iraq's sovereignty because there were no controls. The U.S. prevented both Iraq and the U.S. from doing anything, from taking any action against these contractors. They blocked all legal action. Sailors on a aircraft carrier stand between the sign that says mission accomplished. Major fighting was over, and he called it a victory over terrorism. Unfortunately, bad news, it was just getting started. The insurgency was just ready to explode. In conclusion, violence is an affront to Iraqi's general public health, the need for thorough cultural analysis before making any intervention, outsourcing security without an ethical code of governance, and then I had a number of other recommendations. Iraqi civilians fleeing the fighting around Baghdad, attack against the Hour-Shot Hotel. Somebody exploded a car bomb right in front of it, and the whole face of it collapsed. Construction of a new hotel, in Baghdad in the summer, or at least they're trying anyway. More effects of bombing during March of 2003. Scrambling to get free donated clothing from Jordan in the summer of 2003. Iraqi soldier searching a boy at a polling station. People across the country voted to fill provincial council seats, which went actually fairly well. This is a scene from inside Saddam Hussein's palace along the Shah al-Arab waterway in Basra. Actually, I worked in this complex when I went to Basra. I was the general manager of a Kuwaiti-backed firm that was actually formed as a legal Iraq company. The Kuwaiti backers thought that if an American dealt with Americans and British, that would be much better for business for them than trying to have an Iraqi talk to an American or a British person. And that actually worked out fairly well. We did get a lot of business, but the insurgents threatened all the employees, don't work for this company, don't work for Americans. So the company eventually had to be shut down because of security concerns. People were afraid to come to work because they felt they would get killed. This is relative something, a man that was shot and wounded during the Nicer Square when 17 innocent Iraqis were killed. And actually the company lost its contract to guard the U.S. staff, but the government, after the U.S. government refused to, or actually Iraq's government refused to renew its operating license, but the U.S. government ignored that, and they still used Blackwater as security guards in other areas. Entering the suburbs of Baghdad, I doubt it's changed very much in the last 15 years. Refugees taking shelter in an abandoned factory. And that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Len. We can go to the front page, since you already got your master's degree.
Yeah.
Who would like to ask some questions or make some comment? I don't know if anyone's been in Iraq yourself. Okay, Taslima.
Professor Leonard. It was fantastic because I was in Iraq in 1982-85. That was a wonderful Iraq. I was in Baghdad, I was in Basra, I was in different places, and it was so nice at that time. And it was so green, it was so beautiful, and the houses were so nice. And these pictures really brings back the memory of my friends. I don't know whether they're alive or not. But the thing is, you walk down to the main issue. Why Iraq? It comes to my mind. Why Iraq? Why did they attack Iraq? What was the real cause of attacking Iraq?
Well, actually there was a specific reason. I'm writing a book on it. Making an extremely long story short, I filed three lawsuits, one of which was against a defense contractor that stole hundreds of billions of dollars in Iraq. What I've been able to work out is that Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, and Dick Cheney, the Vice President, deliberately cooked up the war. They deliberately set up a war to allow this contractor to steal money, and then they covered everything all up. The key point here is when they selected a retired Army general to go in to be the head of the Iraq government, he knew one thing that is most important to Iraqis. That family honor is the most important thing. That the highest, most important point for an Iraqi is to maintain family honor. So even if a minister was in a building that had no chairs, sitting on the floor, as long as the minister kept their title, their salary, their position, they were able to feed their family, then they would have supported the Americans. As long as the widows and orphans, the army, the police all got paid, they would have kept their family honor, and they would have not been happy, but at least they would have not started the insurgency. What happened was this general only lasted 30 days. He was kicked out, and they brought in someone who was totally loyal to the Bush administration, and then they got rid of all the previous people that were experts and brought in people that were loyal to the Bush administration that would do whatever they were told. What was the first thing the new man did? He threw everybody out of the Ba'ath Party. He said, if you're in the Ba'ath Party, you no longer have a job. But all the engineers, doctors, lawyers, dentists, nurses, airplane pilots, all the people that took care of the infrastructure, the army, the security, the police, they all had to be in the Ba'ath Party if you wanted a job. So now they're out of work. They have no money. So when did the insurgency in Iraq start? Right from that second. That's when the insurgency exploded. If there's no insurgency, if everybody kept their job, who makes money? Well, nobody. The contractors don't make money. The American army comes in, they fix up as much as they can, they turn the government back over to the Iraqis, they leave. But now you have a raging insurgency. Everybody's against the Americans. Who's making money? The contractor. Not only is the contractor making money from the army because they're cooking the meals and driving trucks and delivering fuel, but they're also stealing hundreds of billions of dollars in goods and equipment on the backside. And no one's investigating that. And then when I reported it, they shut down all the investigations in Iraq and kicked me out of my investigation, kicked me out of security. When I went to the U.S. government and I said, hey, look at this, look at all the stealing, they didn't even investigate. Why? Because of the high-ranking Bush administration officials that were in charge. So that is my personal viewpoint, or my point of my book, as soon as I get it read, or get it written, is that the war in Iraq was concocted. It was all phony. It was just a cover to steal both American money and Iraq's money. That's the only reason. Every other reason they came up with, bringing democracy to Iraq, overthrowing, freeing the Iraqi people, fighting terrorism, it was all proven very quickly to be just nonsense. It was all lies. Everything was a lie. And everything, the whole setup, the invasion was set up very well and went very well, but the occupation after was completely disorganized. But it was all deliberate. They wanted a disorganized occupation. They wanted things to fall apart, which is exactly what happened. So that was my point.
Thank you so much.
Okay, it was good information given to the audience here. Thank you very much. My question is that this is 2018, and at this present world situation, politically speaking, who are the losers in Iraq and who are the gainers? Please tell us from your knowledge. Thank you.
Well, the only winners in Iraq are the current government, which is stealing all the money. Salaries aren't being paid in Iraq. No one's making anything. So people are getting fed up. nothing's getting fixed at all. So the only winners here are the thieves. Everybody else is losing.
And this is the local circumstance. But can you focus this same question from an international point of view?
Well, from an international point of view, what happens in Iraq directly affects Iraq's neighbors. My wife's PhD, which is coming up here very quickly, she talks about the failure to educate Syrian and Iraqi children in all the countries that are surrounding Iraq where they're refugees, which is chaotic. So that is a huge drain on international money that might go to other countries. So money that's being poured into education is being pulled out of other areas, but there's not enough money, especially from the UN and the other NGOs and IGOs to support that. That's one way. Because of the political instability, there's a lot of Iranian influence in Iraq, and there still has been. So that has a direct effect on the instability in the Middle East in general.
U.S. a gainer or a loser?
Oh, the U.S. is a tremendous loser. The Iraq war is going to affect and still affect the United States for decades to come, just like the Vietnam War did. The U.S., again, the only winners in the United States were the thieves.
What about Saudi Arabia, Jordan, or Kuwait? And what about Iran? What position do they get from this current situation?
Well, Saudi Arabia has its own problems. They're just like Iran and just like Jordan. They have their, Jordan has, of course, a lot of political problems and fighting in an insurgency. Kuwait is somewhat stabilized because Iraq isn't in their isn't causing them any problems right now. As far as the other countries that you mentioned, again, they're facing more internal or political or economic problems, but the shadow over everything right now is Iran, so, at least according to what I'm reading. They want to expand their influence any way that they can, but the Iranians have a lot of problems economically because the rial has collapsed against the U.S. dollar and inflation is raging. So it's a very, very complex situation in every single country that have mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sir, I have one. Thank you very much. It's a nice presentation. I just want to have your comment on actually what was wrong in Iraq at that time. I mean, Iraq is a very rich history. You have just told about history. So why they were not able to resist all this kind of thing? What is wrong with Iraq?
Well, you mean what was wrong now or what was wrong before?
At that time.
Well, before?
Before the invasion.
Well, before, nothing. My wife loved it when it was Iraq. Iraq was secular. Women were very powerful in all areas of the economy. They dressed very fashionably. Education was free. Everybody had a job. Healthcare was the best in the Middle East. It wasn't a paradise, but there was control, there was order, there was organization. As long as you didn't directly oppose Saddam Hussein, you were left alone, you were fine. So since every day in my household was Gulf War II with my Iraqi wife, we always have conversations about the war or the aftermath of the war. She always said she loved Iraq. She loved what was going on. She loved her position. She loved the opportunity she had. Women were treated with respect. They could wear lipstick and short skirts, and no one bothered them. All that got swept away with Gulf War II. The hardliners moved in, the terrorists moved in. There was liquor in Iraq, there was gambling, there was a lot of secular type stuff. But again, that all ended. And now she says she can't go home. She doesn't even write. There's nothing left. Everything has been swept away.
I mean, what people are learning from Iraq experience was in countries like Bangladesh or the countries who are aspirating to be developed in a few years' time. I mean, we could face some sort of, this kind of thing here. So what political maturity we need here to tackle this kind of thing?
Well, Bangladesh has had a unique history. It's had a unique background. It's not like the other countries in the Middle East that have strong control per se. I think the lessons from Bangladesh is working out political compromise to be fair to all people. Where you get imbalances economically or politically, then you have opposition rise. Well, look at the students. They're checking ID cards because the police are taking bribes from people, driver's licenses, because the police are getting rich, taking money off of people that don't have driver's licenses. Well, that's not very fair, but it's a sign of corruption. My wife does admit, at least in Iraq, there was some corruption inside, at least Saddam's family, but outside the family, as long as you did your job and you weren't corrupt and everything was fair, you did fine. If you were found to be corrupt, Saddam immediately put you into jail. Which was kind of strange to me, but because his own family was widely known to be very corrupt, but everybody cracked down on everybody else. So there was, according to my wife, there wasn't fairness. There was a communist party. There actually were political parties that were allowed to exist. But what Saddam did not want was any opposition. You could complain up to a certain level. You could be in opposition only to a certain point, but after that, he didn't allow it. So I think each country has its own unique problems. Bangladesh is no different than any other country. It has good points and bad points. It has strengths and weaknesses. I know people are trying to work out the best way that they can to make the country work and function correctly.
Thank you.
My question is really, if we go back to the Arab Spring, the whole Arab Spring, was that something which was also pre-planned? Because we all felt it was pre-planned. How could this just go like wildfire all over the Arab countries? And it's hit all the countries badly, except maybe one or two. The only country which did not have Arab Spring was actually Iran. And maybe Turkey, I'm not so sure about Turkey, but Turkey, though there was an election and so on, and still they're stable. And the other countries have become highly unstable, and the war is going on, and the people who really, the country which started the war, we also started the ISIS groups. They are the ones who are now backing off and not seeing that things are in place. So that's what they want by the New World Order. Then the moral of the American administration is highly questionable. And as a prior UN person, I think the UN has failed miserably, absolutely miserably in taking any decisions. So, the kind of people, the Secretary General and so on, they were just addressing, agreeing to whatever is 5 powers were saying. They more or less were together. So I feel that the Arab Spring, what is your idea about what generated the Arab Spring?
Well, right now the U.S. is like a ship without a rudder. It's just drifting along. It is embracing dictators. It's turning its back on longtime allies. Every day brings a new revelation. Personally, I wouldn't depend on the U.S. for anything, to be really honest with you. Things are in such political chaos, which is spreading. I don't see a happy ending at any time soon. I don't think the U.S. is going to be able to help anybody personally. I hope to be wrong, but I don't know what's going to happen. I wish I could see into the future a little bit better, but I don't see things going well in the U.S. And pretty much the world is going to have to watch itself or take care of its own problems.
Other comments and questions, please, Deborah? No more?
Anyone have any other comments? Well, I think we need to thank Len very much for your excellent job and for raising the issue of bioethics and peace and human security, because it's a critical issue for everyone. And one of the quality of life indicators is the freedom from fear. I'd like to pass the mic to Professor Leblanc, please.
So every noble act has to end. Every